Welcome to the Marvel Alliance podcast, where we cover anything and everything to do with the Marvel Universe. From the comics, TV, and movies, we will go from Earth 616 to the Mojoverse to the TVA in order to bring the Marvel Universe right to you. I'm the man without fear, Chris.
I'm your friendly neighborhood Brent.
Alliance Assemble, Volume 211. And I'm still not okay. I'm still not okay. But, you know, I can deal with this newest episode has given me kind of a brief kind of calming at this point, but I'm still not okay.
I feel like this episode was the calm between the storms. The calm between like last
Pun
week was
intended?
a storm. You know, it might be. It might just be. That's what it feels like. This was just in general a much lighter episode, but we'll get there.
No, it is. It is. So yeah, our main focus tonight is another week without any kind of major news. We know there's a couple of rumors floating around there, but Brent and I are not feeling that it's reached a point where we can feel like it's more than just broken clock scoopers at this point. Though interesting.
I'm going to put one in Factor Fiction just so we can Factor Fiction it off and be done with it.
Okay. That's Brent claiming low-hanging fruit.
The part of me that likes to choose violence thinks would be kind of funny.
Brent has chosen a lot of violence off air tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Whoa, comes out swinging. We'll probably mention it.
Oh, I think we're definitely mentioning it at that point. But yeah, so how's your week been?
It's been good. You know, super wet, super rainy this week, but it has been good. Just massive thunderstorms going on. We had a tornado watch or a tornado warning, whatever one's worse. The warning is worse. You know, everybody was supposed to like shelter and stuff like that. And I don't know, not that far north of me was actual tornado spotting. So it's like, well, that was always interesting, but thankfully, at least where I'm at, nothing bad happened. So
glad that happened. Last week was our very rainy week. My lawn looked like a freaking jungle by the time I mowed it. So that was a joy. But this week, it's like we're going to summer. This is what the last few weeks in North Carolina, at least my area of North Carolina, has been. We are cool for about a week. Then we start creeping up in spring-like temperatures. Then we have a week of summer, which is what we're in right now, just for it to drop back down to the 60s, and then we repeat this process.
Well, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so it's been warm, it's been nice. Been very busy at work this week. I knew this week had a lot of meetings and things like that, but it's almost over. It's almost over, and like we said, we do all this for you the people. So,
I mean, we do, but I do it for me too.
That's true, selfishly. But all right, so before we get into the episode, we got to do our lovely network plug. So we are part of the Geek Ultimate Alliance network with 7 shows covering the wide range of geek and nerdom. To see the full schedule, check out the show notes below and subscribe to the Geek Ultimate Alliance network on Twitter at GUA Pod Network so you know when all the shows drop. We also have a Patreon with, so if you want to throw a couple of shekels our way, we've got 2 tiers. We've got our $1 tiers, our tip jar to say, hey, you think we're doing a good job? And then we've got our $5 tier with ad-free episodes, early access episodes, and Patreon exclusive shows, including our first Patreon show. We can watch this all day, the Marvel Alliance Infinity Saga Rewatch, 24 episodes covering the chronological order of the Infinity Saga, there for your listening pleasure. And Brent and I have started the newest Patreon Marvel Line show called The Tales from the House of X, looking at our favorite Fox-era X-Men movies. Deadpool is up there, and Brent and I recorded, not to be outdone, the sequel this week.
Yep, Deadpool 2.
Deadpool 2.
It's recorded, it's in the can, it's ready to post the last Monday of the month.
Yep, so we got 2 more weeks till that drops, so our next one up is The Wolverine, so we'll record that in May to drop at the end of that. But yeah, we're having a good time revisiting this, so it's been a lot of fun. So the DC Alliance guys are doing their DC films through the years. Joe, in his Multiverse Minutes, is looking at it's not Multiverse Minutes now. It is he's retitled. He's at least got his show Disney Deep Dives. At that point, he's looking at all the animated and now the animated adjacent. He's doing a little loophole to add some more content to it. His most recent episode, I believe, is Dumbo. I think Dumbo was just dropped. So he drops it on the 1st and 15th of the month. So Disney Deep Dives with Joe. And but yeah, a lot of back content out there. Check it out. We want to thank our patrons. We can't do this without your support. But if you're not a member of our Patreon, go to www.patreon.com/GUA Network. to get all that lovely Patreon content. If you can't join us on Patreon, we completely understand. You want to take 30 to 90 seconds and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We greatly appreciate it. And last but certainly not least, we want to thank our official sponsor, OrganicPrizeBooks.com, for omnibus hardcover collected edition needs. JP and the crew at OPB have got it going on with excellent customer service, immaculate packaging, ships around the world. Right now, this is the time before the discounts start changing on Organic Prize Books for these lovely pre-orders, including Punisher Max by Jason Aaron and Dylan, X-Men Extinction Agenda omnibus at that point, Ghost Rider 2099. All this, use that code MARVELGUA at checkout to get $2 off every single order. And we want to thank them for being our official sponsor. All right, I think that's all. I don't think we have any big network programming notes ahead of us, so let us get into this. X-Men 97, Episode 6, Life, Death, Part 2. So, we saw the episodes, like where the episodes titles were going to be before the shows came out, so we already knew, after getting Life, Death, Part 1, we at least knew what part of this episode was going to be focusing on as the conclusion of Storm and Forge's kind of saga together at this point. But I didn't think, I was quite surprised, because I know people say, well, it came out in the preview clip. I don't watch those, so I'm completely unknown to what it was. So shocked as I may be as how this episode opened with not Storm and Forge, but another character that has been missing in action, as it were.
Yeah, this episode, like the Motendo Life Death episode, we're going to have to talk about this in two parts, basically. There were two different stories in this week's episode. They didn't give it two different titles, and I'm just going to say this about the Life Death stuff. I don't think the two different Life Death parts between the episode 2 weeks ago and the episode yesterday, at least yesterday is the time we record this, I don't think that there were two full episodes worth of content, and that's why they split it up this way. It felt like between the two, you had one episode worth of content, maybe a little less. And
Storm and Forge.
Yeah, with the Storm and Forge stuff. And I'll be honest, not only did it feel that way, but it felt like a What If Season 1 episode in that it wrapped up super fast. And I actually felt like it was a little almost shortchanged. Like it needed a little more time to breathe. I felt like to really, and I know we got the week off, sort of gave us some time, like actual real time on the calendar, but I felt like we needed story time to, I'll just say it. It seemed like it was easy. It resolved easy. In the grand scheme of things, it just felt like it resolved easy. That doesn't mean it visually wasn't cool. Doesn't mean I didn't like the overall story. I just felt like there needed to be a little more to it.
Yeah, it's one of those where I think if there were kind of nitpicks about the series itself, is how quickly they wrap up things, and to the point of almost too quickly, namely how they kind of wrapped up Storm's thing going on at this point. How quickly, in one way, for spoilers, not going to say who the character is necessarily at this point until we get into spoilers, but this one character and how quickly they end up changing what their direction is at this point. But I'm also glad that we got to see what has been going on with this character instead of just having a throwaway line to say, oh, just been doing this, which could have happened easily.
I'm hoping that the relative urgency between both of these storylines was just to reorganize the chess pieces for the final 4 episodes of Bringing the Pain. Of being being awesome, of big set pieces. And if that's the case, fine, I'll give it to him. But it's just how I felt at the end of the episode. It's like, I like this story and I like that story, but I felt like they both needed more time.
Yeah, and with everything, with how much of a action gut-wrenching episode the last one was, this is typical TV, even in animation. It can't always just be action like that, because then you just become numb to it. This is done intentionally to kind of ease you back at that point, let you take an ease back, and then you're going to get more gut punches later. Because they be coming, people. They are coming. So, but all right. Well, I'm tired of dancing around this, so
let's just get to it.
All right. So let's take our first ad break before we lift the spoiler wall. So, listeners, if you have not finished or watched Episode 6, Life, Death, Part 2 of X-Men 97, stop, watch it, come back. But if you want to be spoiled, we're coming on after the ad break. So, ladies and gentlemen, these ads help keep the lights on at the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on. They can be a bit loud. Give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. And we are back. All right, Brent. So, like always, let's talk about the, as we always do, the new stuff in the intro. So, in this one, we have Storm doing the previously on X-Men.
Yep.
Appropriate. They seem to be, that's the one whoever the episode focus is going to be on. Magneto and Gambit are gone from the title team, so because they are supposedly dead. Nightcrawler is now in the lineup.
Love that. Not that I wanted the others to die, but I love the inclusion of Nightcrawler. And I will just tell you, I had a Fact or Fiction from 2 weeks ago that was Nightcrawler will like formally join the team. And I was going to use it tonight, and I pulled it because he's in the opening sequence. I'm like, I don't need any more confirmation. I loved it. It was an awesome shot. Just seeing Nightcrawler there, one of my favorite X-Men characters. He may not have been in the episode other than that, but honestly, that was enough for me. Just seeing him, elevated to the big leagues of the show. Loved it.
Yep, and Brock is with us right now saying, go Nightcrawler. Absolutely. So next we have Nimrod coming out of a Master Mold's body and then being taken down by Bishop and in the alternative future version of Wolverine and Storm.
Yes.
So dating back to that episode, another personal favorite of mine. And then we get the X-Men fighting the Imperial Guard and Professor X at their first meeting of Lilandra, touching and then kissing later on. So, they do a good job of hinting at some of these new inclusions or hinting at what is going to be the episode about. So when I saw that, I was like, all right, looks like we're going to space and seeing good old Chuck.
That's not the character I thought you were going to mention that we get to see. I thought you were going to mention Vulcan. Just get it out of the way early.
No. We're gonna let you sit on that for a bit, right?
All
there.
right. It bugs you more than me. I was delighted.
No, the character doesn't bug me. It's the other thing we're gonna choose violence on at that point. So, all right. So we get a big battle in space where the Shi'ar are imagine this, fighting another civilization, namely the Kree, because why not? The Marvel Universe loves beating up on the Kree, right?
It was cool. It was cool to see Ronan because I don't remember him in the original series, at least as a speaking part, not at all. Maybe in one of those cameo shots where like Dark Phoenix is rolling around. But it was cool to see Ronan the Accuser there, doing things that Ronan the Accuser does, which usually implies just getting whooped up on because he never comes out on top. Let's be real.
Yeah, and it's the original kind of Kree stuff, like the green and white, the original Captain Marvel uniforms. So that was kind of cool.
Yes.
We get Deathbird flying in there, blazing in, the sister of Lilandra, and the Imperial Guard. And here's who makes up the Imperial Guard. I had to dig back into my memory banks to make sure I got these right. So you have Gladiator, Manta, Titan, Arc, Earthquake, Starbolt, Smasher, and Flashfire take down the Kree and Ronin very quickly, and are looking for where the Supreme Intelligence has fled to. So you gotta love these, wait a minute, Supreme Intelligence fled? Are we supposed to know this happened? No, we just kind of go with it at this point.
Yeah, just roll with it all.
And blink if you miss it, Brent. Who is there standing guard over the Kree?
Vulcan.
Yes, and who is Vulcan? And why should we care?
Well, some people would say you shouldn't, but I will. Vulcan is Gabriel Summers. I just enjoy the Summers family. Like I told you before we start, just call me Mr. Sinister. I have a thing for him. I like them all. Havoc might be my favorite one, but Cyclops, he's right and awesome. And Gabriel Summers, I like him. I like the Vulcan character, but he was introduced in a pretty... I'm not even going to say polarizing story, just a pretty dislike story called X-Men Deadly Genesis. And this is where I blew your mind before we started. I enjoy that episode. That comic series. I have read it several times. And at this point, the only reason I haven't reread it, even though I've thought about it more than once in the last year, is there's so many other books I haven't ever read before. It's hard to justify rereading something when I've got content I've never read before.
Yeah, Brock saying, who blinks during these episodes?
During some of them you can't, but for sure.
That's me watching the show Shogun there, Brock, because most of it's in subtitles. And I blink it, I've already missed what they're saying. But yes, quick correction: Cyclops is still wrong. The never, absolutely not. I don't hate on the character of Vulcan. I think in the Krakoan era, he takes a very weird turn, and I'm not.
To be fair, I haven't read. I don't know what he's done in Krakoa.
It takes a very weird turn, and it's just I wouldn't have done that to the character necessarily. I don't hate on the character Vulcan. I get it. It brings another new dynamic to the Summers family. However, I'm not a fan of the Deadly Genesis. I don't say you kill it with fire, but it's definitely not going to be on the top of any of my X-Men story list.
It did for sure.
The art is incredible, though. I really do love the art.
Well, yeah, I think most people would actually agree with that. But basically, when the Chris Claremont X-Men team came around, the original team was lost on Krakoa, and when Deadly Genesis is this other story of X-Men that also tried to help, and that was involved in that series. And it was one of those, they were always there, but nobody knew about it, shoehorned in kind of things. I fully acknowledge all that. It just ultimately worked for me, largely because of my enjoyment of the third Summers brother. And he goes on to like the rise and fall of the Shi'ar Empire and Emperor Vulcan and
that is a good storyline.
And I enjoyed all those storylines. So for me, it all is just one collective giant. I enjoyed it. So regardless, he doesn't even have lines. We've talked about him way more than he's relevant to the episode. It's just I definitely like rewound. I was like, wait, did I just see him? That's awesome. Like definitely cool that they included him. Hopefully, speaking parts in the future. But if Cyclops really needs to have a conversation with Havoc first. Yeah, because other than Cyclops telling Havoc he doesn't like his attitude, and then throwing down with X-Men and X-Factor in that in the Cold Comfort episode of the original series, that conversation hasn't happened. So we really need to establish that before we can soap opera it further with the third brother.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the Vulcan being the Summers brother that was born into slavery in the Shi'ar Empire. When his father and mother were captured and abducted at that point. So
right, his mom was pregnant at the time of the abduction.
So at one point he became emperor of the Shi'ar Empire. It's interesting, and it definitely wasn't on my bingo card for the of who could possibly appear in this series. So, but yeah, as you said, we already spent enough time for a non-speaking part with that. So. Deathbird is interrupted with a universe-wide message from Lilandra announcing her engagement to Professor X, who is healed and now able to walk thanks to his armor that he's wearing in a very comic-accurate armor, because he did wear that in the comic series right before, I think it was like the arc right before Adjectives of X-Men by Jim Lee and Claremont came out.
Definitely been a while since that one.
So... And we can clearly see from the audience is not happy with this announcement. Shocked and not happy.
No, they look down upon him. They see him as lesser. What is it Deathbird said? The Milky Way ghetto. He's from the Milky Way ghetto, which a line I know David enjoyed thoroughly. Mm-hmm. But they look down upon him, and they see him as almost like he's trying to raise his own station in the Shi'ar Empire, like by marrying one of the royals. And we know that's not Professor X's goal. Like his love for Lilandra is genuine, but they don't know that.
Yeah.
Is it a little xenophobic on the Shi'ar side? Yeah, I would argue it is. But
and they are.
That's hardly a surprise if you've read anything about the Shi'ar.
Yeah, especially as they're Charles and Lilandra are walking through the garden, you see these horse people, a part of their enslaved subjects tending to the gardens.
Yep, that's what they do.
Yep, and he's saying he's getting very homesick and asks Lilandra to consider spending some time on Earth, not asking her to permanently move there, just like going kind of back and forth. And she's not keen on it, but says she will think on it. She also says he needs to be a good teacher and let his students stand on their own 2 feet. But she does realize why he feels guilty for not coming back home and for choosing his own happiness over his dream.
Well, I mean, he's going to blame himself when he truly finds out what happened on Genosha. But in
I
reality,
blame Cyclops.
what you would, what could Xavier have really done to stop that? Unless he could have figured out who the problem was ahead of time, like he couldn't stop anything there. He likely would have just ended up dead also. So it's probably for the best he wasn't there. But I am real curious about the dynamics of when he gets back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we move back to Earth, take a little break, go back to Earth, where we are with Storm, who is caring for Forge, who, remember in the last episode, he was bitten by the adversary, has a pretty bad infection spreading. And you see the adversary in the rafters taunting Storm and trying to get her to abandon him. Interesting enough, the voice actress of Storm, Allison Seeley Smith, is actually the one who voices the adversary, making it even more creepy.
Yeah, and it's a nice touch to do that. It kind of makes it's weird, and it lends itself to the fact like it was sort of in her head, not entirely, obviously, because we know she ends up having the adversary has a physical effect on Forge, but is like almost born from Storm.
And it would have been outside of, like you said, like if he didn't bite him, that would have really been like, who is really seeing this? At that point. The creature is a demonic entity with thousands of years old and extremely powerful, comes from another universe that the main characteristic is chaos. Turning into a trickster, it is able to shapeshift and give its victims powerful hallucinations, as we see very much clear in this episode. Its goal is to take over the universe and then remake it to see how it sees fit. Doesn't care how many people it kills, and it seeks to wipe out the universe and start over. The Cheyenne people realize this and have trained shaman over the years to combat it and to put it away, with them being several prominent figures in Forge's lineage over the years. Now, Storm shows the life lessons that Professor X has taught her that will help and she gives her help that will help Forge despite his involvement in the loss of her powers. She basically says this, like, all life is precious to her, and she even values them above her own.
I'm thinking about and I don't think we're quite to it yet, but I'm just going to mention it. There was this one moment in the Storm Forge life death stuff that I found incredibly awkward and rushed. It was a little bit that way when it was mentioned in the previous episode of these two, where Forge confessed his love at arguably the least romantic time ever. After, saying, hey, I'm behind you losing your powers through a domino effect, but I love you.
I love you, my goddess.
But Storm reciprocated that in this week's episode. It just felt weird and like massively rushed. And I don't know. I'm like, you're not a, 16-year-old having your first crush on somebody. It's like, you are an adult. Why are you just moving like lightning pace here? Like, I don't know. It felt weird to me.
Yeah, and again, it's just like we said, this was the difficulty of when you have these two storylines together, things are going to get rushed. And I don't know, it's a catch-22 when it comes to a series like this, in the sense of, we know there's a second season coming, okay? But that's the thing, we don't know what's coming if another one's coming after that. So the fact that this whole series got a relaunch and that we get, it's just like, you're darned if you do, darned if you don't. And so do you spend your time on storylines like this, or do you kind of fudge a little bit, get certain things done while you get more time to focus on the bigger arcs? I could see the argument either way. I don't think this is a storyline that you would spend more time on, but you could have cut out a little things like they could be falling in love, but you don't need to necessarily, I love you and marry me,
And I know they were an item for a while in the comics. I know
They
they were together. I don't remember it being a particularly long time. It's not like we have a Scott Summers Jean Grey situation here. I don't even think it was as long as Storm was married to T'Challa. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think it was. But regardless, it just seemed fast. But maybe that's all it was. We did this in the comics. Let's see, let's throw a bone to that almost as an Easter egg, and we'll go with that.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a catch-22. I wasn't a fan of it. I knew what they were trying to go for, and it is what it is. So we get some little bit more with the adversary that continues to taunt her, and at this places her in a coffin, and we all know Storm is claustrophobic, and basically saying, be careful what you wish for. It brings up Storm saying how she told Jean she wondered what it would be like to be human, which was something that she said to her in the bedroom during episode 2. The adversary uses its shapeshifting powers to transform into X-Men with its abilities, sort of being similar to Loki. Both are known as tricksters, and we see how magic can be used to defeat them. This is when Forge comes out of nowhere, breaks out holding a book of spells, creating these circular runes similar to another major player in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What did those, like his magical sorcery, look like?
Well, it looked like the magic from Doctor Strange, Wong, the Sorcerer Supreme,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. It looked really really close to it. They had to take inspiration from it. They absolutely had to have, and it just makes me wonder if there are any further connections between the two types of magic.
Mm-hmm. And it was good. Again, people say, "Oh, this means that it's connected." It's like, we're not going to go that far. Again, multiverse, anything like that, but they know what they're doing when they do it like this. I mean, even they have the sparks at that point.
It was intentional. There's no getting around it. And again, people keep trying to find these connections. It's all connected like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. season 1 advertising was, where it's like in the same universe. It is all connected. They're in a multiverse. That's literally what they're doing. We're a part of the multiversal saga right now. I don't know why people keep looking for what's already in front of them. Multiverse, that's what's going on.
Yeah, multiverse, it makes it's all connected. So Forge does reveal that he knows there's a cacti that grows in a cave that might be able to cure him. Forge doesn't want to be alone in case he does die, and will go with Storm on the journey. Now, in the comics, the adversary posed as Nazi. It's a Native American ally of Forge, and it went to Storm trying to get her to find Forge. Forge was attempting to close a dimensional rift that the adversary had opened, and he placed demon-destroying devices along the way. The adversary told Storm that Forge was actually trying to open the gateway, and she was the only one who could stop him. Storm did go after him, but quickly realized the truth when the adversary sprung its trap. Now, in the book, they had a Wraith take over Naze, and that the adversary had taken over them. Here in the show, they just took out the middleman without Naze and just had the adversary, which, again, I don't think we need to introduce a third party into this. It's just, it makes sense that the adversary is just playing them both.
Yeah, exactly.
So then we, take a pause. Let's go back into space, Brent. And actually, before we go back to space, let's take our next ad break at that point. Let's do that nice transition. So as you know, listeners, these ads help keep the lights on in the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on. They could be a bit loud. Give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. And we are back. All right, Brent. So, yes, let's now go into space. And we get a lot of bird references in this next scene because, the Shi'ar, their headdresses and everything, they are shaped like owls at that point. They even call their babies hatchlings.
I mean, if the shoe fits, I guess. But
even in the episode, you took that the owl that eventually turned into the adversary. I mean, all these bird references throughout the entire episode too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we see Lilandra hold court with Charles, and he's being introduced as her consort, which he kind of like makes a snide comment like, I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, but he says he feels like her pet, and then says, a little risque for the X-Men, oh, though that could be fun. And she says something to the effect of, quiet, you can bark later. Like, oh, you guys are, we don't kink shame, but you guys are going for it.
Yeah, you are. You definitely are at that point. Deathbird arrives, claiming that Charles wants to make Earth the new homeworld for the Empire, and that humans are very low, like you said, the Milky Way ghetto. She also slams like the humans, calling them Terrans, scum, something to that effect. And Charles denies this. And she says that if he truly wants to show his loyalty to the Empire, then she initiates Madasha, which is the test that she chooses what will happen for him to prove his worth. He must erase all memories of his past, including his time with the X-Men, to ensure this connection is severed forever and that he would never think about going home to Earth and making sure that the Shi'ar Empire stays where it is. And he's like, I'm a powerful telepath, but I can't do that to myself. And Deathbird's like, don't worry about that. We have that ability to do that. In fact, Lalandra has that ability, so she's going to do it to you.
Considering they met as part of, well, the Phoenix Saga ultimately, but Adventures with the X-Men, if they really went through with it, would Xavier even remember Lilandra? Or would he be like, why am I a human on this planet right now?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he wouldn't know. Like, the entire reason he's there is because he's an X-Man.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's just like, oh, she gets to choose how to screw them over? Oh, that seems fair.
Yeah.
So Charles visits the statues of Shara and Kithri, who were warring gods who eventually married in order to bring harmony to the Empire, and you can't see poetic poetry in that one. And Charles is there with Gladiator, and he talks with him, talking about how the Shi'ar see art as deviancy, but yet they do something like this huge statue. He finds it kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it's during this that Xavier compares Gladiator to Magneto. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, you're a lot...
Magnus.
You're like my friend Magnus, who I would very much like to remember, so... Never mind, forget it. I'm going to just keep all my memories. The deal's off.
Yeah. And Charles realizes through his connection to Earth that he can't erase his life and that he'd like to remember the people he knew. Now, the Shi'ar want him to be the man he is, but they don't realize it's the memories that actually made him who he is.
Exactly.
Had he not clashed with Magneto, then he wouldn't have gone in the opposite direction. Thus, he needs to retain them in order to stay who he is, and it's obviously a very tough decision to make.
It is a tough decision to make, but I mean, he's basically being forced into, pick your friends and your family or pick your loved one. And typically,
but don't pick your nose.
Don't pick your nose. Typically, those kind of ultimatums are not. It's like the person giving you the ultimatum, well, you go against them. Problem is, the ultimatum's not coming from Lilandra in this case. It's coming from.
There's another bad storyline. You keep bringing up these questionable storylines.
Not that ultimatum. That one wasn't great. I mean, yeah. It's fine. Whatever. I'm not going to defend that one.
All right, so let's head back to Earth, Brent, and let's see what's going on with Storm and Forge. They arrive at Snow Stake Tower that used to be used during the Civil War by Union troops to store arms and armaments. And before that, it was during the Plains Wars, which basically wiped out a lot of Forge's people. And he said they tricked the Native Americans that they were there to help them, which is what Forge basically did to Storm.
Pretty much. I hadn't quite thought about it that way, but yeah.
And so as they walk through the cave, they talk about the adversary, why she isn't as judgmental. And Storm's had things happen to her in her past before with her gifts causing people to hate her. Forge says that the worst lie used by the Europeans was not the bullets or the blankets, it was the white lies. This is the lie of normalcy that colonizers like Rudyard Kipling and the Shi'ar would use, saying that, hey, if you become like us, you won't have to be afraid anymore.
Right.
And one of the reasons Forge came with her, because he said, well, I came with you because you got to crawl through that. And
yeah, his excuse of, I don't want to die alone, like the way he said it didn't sound very genuine.
Which is most of what Forge is doing.
Right. But we now this tells us it wasn't genuine. The real reason was he was here to support her having to go into that.
Yep. So it was a very small crawl space. So she's forced to crawl in there through the tunnel and to climb up to a spot where the cactus is. But then the adversary arrives. Now, I'm not sure because it almost looked like the adversary was banished at that point. So I'm not sure if they just put him in timeout, if this is really the adversary, or is this something that because of the claustrophobic, she's creating her own hallucinations.
Feels like the kind of situation where it may have. I took it as the adversary was really there, but the way Storm more or less, for lack of a better word, banishes the adversary, it leaves us in this place of like they could easily bring that character back if they want to, but they don't ever have to because it did serve its purpose.
Yes, and so she basically kind of fights back against all the self-doubt she's doing. It's like she's not afraid. She's going to go through this. So she confronts her fear, overcomes it, digs deep. Then all of a sudden her powers come back in huge form, flies out of there and creates a new suit, very pretty much identical to her original suit from Giant X-Men #1, and pushes that fear back forever, overcoming it. And I'm gonna throw a little DC in there. The flying sequences in there was to me, very reminiscent of Man of Steel. Flying along, because she's also flying along with horses, looking at the shadows
I thought
of herself.
Superman the animated series.
Okay,
that's what I went. I kept it in the '90s, and that's what I thought of there because there's those scenes of young Clark doing the same thing.
Very fair. I'll allow it. I'll definitely allow it. Still works.
Spectacular scene though. Spectacular scene.
Just the whole transformation was very cool.
So good. Yes.
Somehow her hair grows back.
If her powers can make a costume, which we've seen her do before, effectively, I'm gonna say super hair growing powers is a thing. That's fine.
Oh, kids, let's not try this at home. Standing out in the sun, trying to grow your hair into different ways. I don't recommend it. Marvel Alliance does not subscribe to doing that.
Well, I will. Yes.
Just saying, we got to look after the young people there, Brent.
Yeah, fair enough.
So we head back to Forge's house, and she's able to heal him. He's talking, let's go to Bermuda. Let's just get away from everything. And that's when Storm makes a mistake, turns on the TV, and what does she see in shock?
The results of Genosha. And a lot of other countries, the original countries of a lot of the mutants in Genosha saying, too bad, so sad, we don't want you back.
Yes, and I do remember the reporters saying this is all Cyclops' fault.
I think that was a direct quote.
Yes, it was actually that reporter. Yeah, it's never getting old. I'll just slip it in there all the time. All right, so let's go back. So we've concluded our stuff with Storm and Forge. That story is done. So we obviously mean that Storm's gonna be heading back. Don't know with or without Forge. What do you think? Is Forge coming along for the ride?
Man, that's.
How far does this love go?
No, I don't think Forge is, because I think if Forge was, he'd have been in the credits. That said, if he's in the credits next week, then I guess sure, but otherwise no.
Yep, I'd put it at a little over 50% chance.
Okay, all right, that's fair.
So, but if not, I'm not upset. He'll be back again. If not, hey, the future. Hey, future Forge could be next week.
I'm certainly not opposed to seeing the character again. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha. All right, so we are at the Shi'ar Council ceremony to wipe Charles's mind. Charles looks like he's resisting, which Deathbird quickly jumps on, saying, "See, he's not going to go through this. He's a liar at that point." And with that, I want you to strip Lilandra of her title. And then she attacks, she must have watched a lot of Karate Kid, the first one, because she didn't sweep the leg, but she went for the legs and went for the knees to cut him down.
Yeah, pretty much sums it up, and that's okay, because Professor X, Xavier, he's going to take them all to school anyway.
Exactly, and who comes to their aid? Interestingly enough, to defend them.
You mean Gladiator?
Gladiator,
right?
Not Vulcan, because Vulcan's a coward.
Well, sure, but Vulcan follows Gladiator because Gladiator he's in charge of the Imperial Guard, and so that was a great moment though when Deathbird goes after her and Gladiator call it what it is. He's I'm going to say space Superman, even though I realize Superman comes from space, but you know what I mean. He's basically a different Superman, and he's Shi'ar Superman, and he just flies in the way, and awesome scene, loved it.
Yeah. And I love the thing, like he's starting to dig deep, and everyone's digging deep on this one. And Charles realizes he's forgotten his greatest gift, not his powers, but being a teacher to stop this. And he uses the gift to take everyone to the astral plane, and all of them sitting down. He's going to teacher mode at this point, and a lot of cheeky behavior and comments from him, including giving Deathbird demerits with an apple in her mouth to keep her from speaking anymore.
Yes, that got a laugh out of me.
He says the Shi'ar created lies like we did with the Native Americans to get them to subjugate their the places they took over to their rule and spread their empire. Who would have thought that both these stories arcs would connect to each other? That I did not see coming.
No, definitely not.
But what happens during his lecture? His lecture is very much interrupted. What happens, Brent?
Yeah, that was kind of trippy because it's like, how did he find out about this? Basically, like everybody turns into skeletons, and you get sort of like the crazy sentinel from last week that more or less turns into giant Gambit, and he realizes he says something like the unthinkable has happened or something along those lines. Like he realizes Gambit is dead, and like I want to know what tipped him off. Like what was the trigger? That obviously he has psychic powers. I can believe that he has the ability to do that because we know that Professor X and Lilandra could speak to each other telepathically across space. Did Jean reach out to him? Did Madeline Pryor reach out to him? Did, assuming well, I think we saw Madeline die last week, so probably not her. But regardless, how did he find out? That's what I want to know. But visually, it was a pretty interesting sequence.
Yeah, you get like giant. Everyone's turning skeletons. Giant Gambit, then face melting off.
He was a giant-sized X-Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and his name is Gambit. Remember it.
Remember it. That's right.
And so we close Charles kind of snaps out of it and collapses, and then realizes I got to go back. I'm gonna go. It sounds like the episode was, we got to go back. We got to go back. So he's going back to Earth. He's coming home. And it'll be very interesting to see what that rules like. Because, again, the world thinks Charles Xavier is dead. But just because they haven't seen him. And I don't know why they didn't clear this. I don't know why, this world doesn't necessarily think that aliens don't exist. So, them not saying, no, he was just taken to space and, we're assuming he's okay.
It's a world that we know members of the Avengers have been in it. Spider-Man is in that world. Thor is in that world. The Phoenix has attacked. You would have thought at some point they could have said, he's actually alive, he's off-world. They could have left it at that.
Who knows? But then we kind of get we don't get a true end credits, but basically kind of feels like an end credits before that we get Bolivia or Trask running from something. He's scared out of his own mind. He says, I did what you wanted. I gave you the blood sample to access Master Mold. We do see a theater sign advertising War of the Worlds, so hinting towards the future?
Potentially there.
Yes.
And we find out, at least allegedly, certainly plausibly, who is behind the attack on Genosha.
Yes, we see out of the shadows, who is he speaking to is someone sinister, Mr. Sinister.
Yeah, and so now it raises all kinds of questions of how are the X-Men going to react with it being mutant bad guy versus humans? How's Magneto going to react with it being, not being the humans? The question is we know it's Sinister. Are they going to know it's Sinister? Or is Sinister basically going to frame the humans? Is Sinister working for somebody? Is there somebody above him? I think those are reasonable questions.
No, it definitely is, because, we know Sinister's purpose of the, what is it, the baby, getting the baby back and creating the baby was to fight Apocalypse.
Right. Yeah, he's probably not working for Apocalypse, but Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, and also with the whole idea of what's his plan now? He obviously did not the whole Nathan thing. Nathan's in the future now, and so what is his next step? And so what if it is Sinister, which signs are right now pointing to it is, especially with the powers that the Mega Frankenstein Sentinel were green, and we saw nothing but green goo and green vats in the lab at that point. So it signs point to Sinister, but it doesn't necessarily mean it right now. But the question is, if it is Sinister, what does he gain by this? What was his purpose of wiping out all these mutants? That he being a a huge murderous genocidal maniac in the sense that, but he uses mutants to form his own super mutants, like this kind of island of Dr. Moreau kind of thing. But what does he gain by doing this?
He does, but really that's always been just specifically targeted to ultimately get the Summers and Gray DNA and bloodlines. He has those now, so it could be something different.
Okay.
Just speculation, of course.
Yeah, definitely speculation, but right now signs are pointing to it. So the next episode is entitled Bright Eyes, which is what Rogue calls Cable in the original show right before she punches him. So he says, "Hey, how you doing there, Bright Eyes?" and then nails him. So could we be billing? Could at some point in this episode, could we be visiting the future, Brent?
Or Cable's coming back.
But yeah.
But one way or the other, I think we can safely assume Cable's involved. My best guess would be one of those things where we do visit the future, we see what's going on with Cable, and then he travels back in time. Something the original series went back to more than once.
Yes, I think that is kind of where I really love X-Men 97 is the dystopian futures that are there. So, because obviously he came last episode, he was trying to stop the attack from happening, and he said he is coming. You know?
Yeah, and he made it kind of sound like it wasn't his first try. It's
correct.
Like not again or something like that.
You have a Groundhog Day kind of thing going on.
Oh, that would actually, a Groundhog Day episode of Cable trying to stop the events. One might be kind of hard to watch Gambit die that many times, but it could make for a great episode. Of course, I'm a sucker for those kind of episodes.
You know what? You and I have enjoyed many of superhero shows that have done it and done it very successfully. Groundhog Days.
I like them every time. Every time I'm into it.
Just like clones, right?
I do like clones, yes.
Yeah. So, but all right. So, episode 7 is next week. It is basically the penultimate episode before the 3-episode finale that'll be dropping. So there'll be 3 parts to wrap up this season of X-Men 97. Each dropping each week, but this is the episode before. So I'm thinking this is where, if you remember the trailer, this is where we're going to see the casket going into the ground. That'll probably be Gambit.
Just 4 more weeks. That's all
4 more weeks, but it's definitely been an enjoyable ride. So, but yeah, so good kind of interlude episode. If you were to, where would you put this against Motendo and Life Death Part 1?
No, it's above those two, or I guess that one. It's above Motendo Life Death Part 1.
Yeah. I would agree with you on that. It's definitely it definitely ranks above it. So, all right, Brent. So let us head into listener feedback, Fact or Fiction, to Comic Book Club. So you put out the Spidey signal as always. Got a number of questions this week, so hit us with them.
First up from Edward. This actually came in last week. I frankly missed it, so sorry about that, Edward. But he says, so the Watcher being there in episode 5 means this is a what-if universe, technically, right? Yes, I absolutely think it's a what, but even without the Watcher, I already thought that. We kind of addressed that earlier, but yes, I absolutely believe this is effectively a what-if universe, and I maintain at some point one of the X-Men 97 versions of these characters will show up in an episode of What If. I do think that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's plenty of Watchers. We're going to assume it's a Watu at that point. The geek side of me is saying, yes, it is, but just the fact that we see the Watcher there is just cool on face value.
From David, and maybe I should have gotten a little clarification on this, but how do we see the militant or revolutionary Cyclops? I feel like ultimately this is the kind of thing, the events of Genosha will push Cyclops down that path. And we sort of saw it in episode 5 when he basically is screaming at Trish, the news reporter, about how, he's tired of having to make himself look normal because he's not normal, they're not normal, and like the mutants are different, and he's tired of acting that way. Like, he was already starting to go down that path after everything with his son, with Madeline, with Jean, and then of course now he's lost several friends and his race has been attacked. Like, he's definitely on that path.
Yeah, it's
not to mention he called himself the good guy in episode 1. Are you a good guy or a bad guy? Definitely a good guy, he says, right? Like, they're moving that down that path where it's not so easy of a question for him to answer.
Yeah, it's all going to depend. Like, I think next episode there's going to be some big revelations coming at that point. That's, again, we're still probably going to feel some pain, but I think Cyclops finding out like some truths, some more truths at that point. I wouldn't go revolutionary. I'd definitely be more hard nosed at that point. Like he is no longer if next episode they do see the return of Professor X, I don't think Scott's going to greet him with open arms. Scott's going to be feeling like he was abandoned.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense because he's gonna be like, "You've been healed for months. Where have you been?"
So,
Let's see. Next up from Dookie, I thought this was kind of interesting. Where would you guys rank X-Men '97 as it currently stands against the Fox X-Men properties? Actually, he just said against all the Fox properties, so I guess we can include the Fantastic Four if we want.
so we're talking about. I'm assuming the animated properties, or are we talking live action?
I think you could argue either way.
Okay. I guess we'll just do everything Fox.
I mean, the Deadpool movies are still my favorite thing that True Fox has put out.
Yeah. There's that, but I think it's a hard and kind of it's a little unfair, the question, just because you have singular movies, yet with how many episodes? I mean, even the last season at that point, I mean, you have a entire franchise show versus a couple of movies here.
I mean, we're getting X-Men '97 is getting to combined runtimes of some of these movies, probably on the longer end. But if we want to compare it to even the original series, I've already seen so much. This is way better than the original series. I'm like, yeah, but you're comparing like 6 episodes versus 5 seasons. Every single season had at least double the length of episodes. It is better than season 5, but seasons 1 through 4, I don't know. There was some great storytelling there. So I'm not ready to. Let's see how this season wraps up first before I feel like we can answer that part of it. But I probably like Days of Future Past more than this. But the rest of the X-Men movies, I'll probably give X-Men '97 the nod.
Yeah, it's one of those things where right now it's definitely hitting on all cylinders. It's definitely right now kind of in top 5 area. You know, I would definitely put it up there with it, and that's a testament to. It wasn't bad writing in X-Men '97. I mean, the original X-Men animated series, but it's stronger writing now, and they're tackling stuff that back then I didn't think they would ever touch with a 10-foot pole.
No, and we've mentioned this before, but they clearly, I feel like they're targeting us who watched the show as it was originally coming out. So if that show was written more for kids, this show is written more for adults.
Yeah. So
from Anthony about Storm, new look or old look? Just to clarify, the new show look, because we know that's the original look, or the older show look, which is like the white costume.
Yeah. It proves my factor of fiction though from the other week.
That's the first thing I thought of actually.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I said some or all. This is some.
No, you got that one for sure.
Yeah. I like the change. It again, you're hearkening back to my nostalgia for the Claremont era, and even though Storm makes a comment when she tries on her uniform that it's a little revealing at that point, it has nothing revealing. I'm just a sucker for some good nostalgia. I like them both for different reasons, but her transformation was just, oh my god, it was so like kick butt awesome.
They're both great costumes. I'm always down to see a new costume. But if I have to pick which one I like more, I'm going to go with the animated series original costume, the white costume first. Like that is my favorite costume for Storm. But when I saw this, I was still like, okay, that's really cool that they used this opportunity as this effective rebirth of herself, reinvention of herself to bring in a new costume. Like that'll be cool. And Jubilee's going to have a good response to seeing it. It should be fun.
It definitely will be.
One more question from Amari Daniels. What MCU movie do you feel should come immediately before Secret Wars? The first Avengers set up Cap joining the modern world before the Avengers. Same with Captain Marvel before Endgame. What do you think should lead into Secret Wars?
It took me a little bit to think about it, but I have my answer. Doctor Strange 3.
I think that's a good choice. my answer, I don't. It won't. It's not going to be this the way it's shaping up. But I would put if the speculation that the Fantastic Four takes place in another universe is true, that would be my answer. Because I feel like going into a multiversal movie, giving us some focus in another universe would be a good thing. Because we really haven't had that much. We've had some. I would do a lot more though. So that if that's true, that would be my answer. If it's not true, I would figure out some way to get us to spend some time in another world either way, and that would be what I'd go with.
Yeah, I like that idea too. So a lot of good questions this week. Appreciate everyone reaching out. So fact or fiction. So let me pull those up for the rankings. And like we said, kind of hinted towards one of them. I didn't think it was gonna be that quickly proven true, but hey, I'll take the W on it.
Absolutely.
All right. So fact or fiction number 1. Before X-Men 97, we will get some, possibly all, the team getting new suits. 88% said fact. 12% said fiction. Number 2, Daredevil Born Again will drop on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 81% said fact, 19% said fiction. And number 3, Magneto will return in X-Men 97, losing faith in humanity and going full villain, leading to an adaptation of Fatal Attraction's arc from the comics. 81% said fact, 19% said fiction.
Okay.
All right, Brent.
I'm up.
Hit me with them.
I got a couple X-Men 97 ones and then something different.
I like being on brand. Let's go.
Gambit will be alive by the end of X-Men 97 Season 1. Not even saying if you want it, just he's going to be alive.
I'm going to say false for this season. I could see him coming back next season, but I will say he will come back as a horseman of the apocalypse.
I like it. I consider doing like
very much like the comics. Not my favorite. Not even favorite, but I can see that happening.
I considered doing by like the end of season 2, but I thought that was almost too easy. Season 1 makes it harder. I'm going to go ahead and say fact. I think he's going to come back because I think most likely Cable is going to, do some time travel shenanigans and save the day. But regardless, I do like the idea of him coming back as a horseman of the apocalypse. So that's a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up. Assuming Magneto is still alive.
Okay.
Cyclops will side with him in a debate with Xavier on how to proceed regarding the events at Genosha in episode 5.
I will agree. I like that, and I like it a lot, and I will see that and raise it to say that Cyclops will join Magneto in forming a separate X team with Magneto.
Effectively, yes. So I think we're both a fact then on that one. Mm-hmm. Cyclops, like I said, I think he's being pushed too far, and he's going to want action.
But that's what I've enjoyed about seeing this, because, again, besides mirroring the comics at this point, I think Scott becomes a much more dynamic character when you have the person who fully believed in Charles Xavier's dream, but then after a while just kept on saying, what are we doing? Like, this is like getting beaten. So that's where I see Scott being the more complex character. That's where I find his character interesting at the time. It doesn't excite me to see him always just being the good soldier falling in line. That doesn't bring much dynamic to the character. This does.
He is at
don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Cyclops is right at that. I'm just saying it's more dynamic character because we must always remember he's wrong.
He is at his most interesting when he's not playing the good soldier for Xavier. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I'm with you there. It would be really interesting. My final one is taking one of those rumors that I referred to earlier, and I'm going to say Sam Raimi will direct the Tom Holland Spider-Man 4 movie. Fact or fiction?
I think there's more of a chance for him directing Doctor Strange 3 than there is at Spider-Man 4.
Yeah, and keep in mind, there were rumors of Doctor Strange 3. There has been speculation, but I wouldn't even call it rumors for Secret Wars, because basically he was asked, would you be interested? Mm-hmm. And he said yes, or he more or less said yes, or he implied it, he would be interested. But I'm a fiction on this one also. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. But I will admit, I got a good laugh out of it just because the thought of people have been calling for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4 for years, since before the Andrew Garfield movie. So the thought of him getting a Spider-Man 4 movie, but not Maguire, I would actually assume if he did it, Maguire would show up somewhere, but not Maguire. Like it just, the thought of it just makes me laugh.
Brent is again choosing violence against.
I know.
All night, Brent. All night.
That's all right. Sometimes
it's all right. No, the watching Twitter burn down at that point with all the people saying how dare they. It just seems like, again, I'm not saying. I mean, Sam Raimi does have stories to tell with Spider-Man, but it's almost to the point where Tobey Maguire's his Spider-Man he did. Not saying he can't direct Tom Holland, but like I don't know if the drive is there if it's not kind of where he wants to pick up with Tobey. But now he's kind of carved out, like mixing his horror, his love of horror, and his niche of horror with an MCU character like Doctor Strange. And I think I'm a big fan of Multiverse of Madness.
I thought it was a good fit.
Yeah, and it seems to something that he can continue doubling down on and even going deeper down the horror track with it.
My word, like I would be very interested in a Raimi directed Maguire starring Spider-Man 4 movie. Yes, sign me up. I'd be very interested in that.
Yeah, same.
Sony, do something radical, have Spider-Man in a Spider-Man movie. But I would be worried if he was directing the Tom Holland Spider-Man 4 because they're the same character.
It's a tone.
They're the same character, Peter Parker Spider-Man, but Tom Holland's Peter is not the same as Maguire's Peter, and I don't want them to feel the exact same, and I'd be worried they would. But regardless, I think it's a fiction. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Again, we would be interested to see it, but I would be concerned in the sense of like the tone is a lot different for Holland's Spider-Man, even despite the results of, what happened in No Way Home.
Right.
So, all right. So as always, I will post those Sunday afternoons, so let your voices be heard. And Brent, let's go to Comic Book Club. And for you listeners, as always, we have our post-credits discussion. You're going to get a double dose of Comic Book Club. It's something that you're going to want to hear Brent's opinion on this because this is something dropped this week that Brent was very excited about and did not see coming.
No, I was, but we'll get there. For now, let's talk Wolverine.
Well, before we talk Wolverine, this brings us to the conclusion of this arc of Comic Book Club. So this time, this past one, this current one we're in, this was the listeners in the Twitterverse choice. So this time it is our choice. And so in honor of, continuing our celebration of and march towards Deadpool and Wolverine, we have chosen something on brand that we think would be something that Deadpool and Wolverine are going to be kind of giving tips of the hat to. And so what we have selected is the 4-issue miniseries, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe.
Something I have never read.
And I have never read either. So this is going to be very interesting. This is a rarity that we both have not read this.
I don't know if there's been something we both
No, there hasn't. Nope, there has not yet.
But this is the time for it.
This is the time for it. So, yes, we know there's a sequel, but we're going to kind of see how this goes. And Brent and I have toyed around with maybe we'll pick up the sequel right after this, but we're just going to see how this goes.
Yeah, if we both are like, we didn't like it, then we're not going to do the sequel. But if we both really enjoy it, maybe we will.
Yes, so synopsis says, what if everything you thought was funny about Deadpool was actually just disturbing? What if he decided to kill everyone and everything that makes up the Marvel Universe? What if he actually pulled it off? Would that be fun for you? The Merc with the Mouth takes on a turn for the twisted in a weekly horror comic like no other. So we will start. You want to start this next week, Brent, or you want to take a break?
Either way is fine.
Okay.
It really doesn't matter.
Well, let's go. Let's start it next week.
Okay.
Let's start it at that point. So,
it's one comic book a week. It's not exactly.
It's definitely probably our shortest arc right now.
And I'm gonna read some comics anyway, so one of them I will happily have be issue 1 of Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but yeah. So that is the that is the next one. So I'm very excited to read it. Like we said, it's our first time reading both. So I figured what a good idea. So all right, let us finally conclude Old Man Logan with Giant Size Wolverine Old Man Logan #1. So this is a one shot. So Brent, yeah, this was everything we had been hoping. The last issue was good. This is what we've been waiting for.
We've been waiting for the claws to come out. And yes, technically the last page of last issue, but the claws are out now. The Wolverine is back, and the way, like, it just starts off with him, just cutting up a couple of Banner's grandkids or Banner's family or whatever the connection is. And the whole issue is just him gruesomely destroying Hulk's family bloodline.
In just, like you said, the most sadistic, brutal kills.
Just several of them get the claws straight through the forehead. All three of them.
Yeah, and this is McNiven and Vines and Hollowell just going full on. The colors, the pencils, like the amount of splash pages, and even just like what you get to him in kind of the man with no name look, a la Clint Eastwood, just standing with a fantastic car with a bloody trench coat hat, and just like you just fake that old spaghetti western music, going on in the background. I mean, this is like what the movie Logan kind of does a great job homaging.
Yeah, for sure. And just looking through it, like there's arguably not a lot of story to this. It's just him killing but it's what
Wolverine does best.
It is, and what he does is not very nice. It's such amazing artwork, and just the gruesomeness with the claws. Like, that's what they, you don't see in X-Men 97, and you don't get in any of the Fox X-Men movies other than Logan, is like what he really can do with these claws.
Yeah, especially when he goes after Banner, especially when you think he's got him, and since he plugs him with it, and Hulks out and eats Logan.
Now, I do think they should have made it a little more clear of how Banner was as strong as he was in the form of Banner.
Yeah, that was just like, okay.
I'll accept the difference. And, he gets killed by Wolverine, supposedly, and then he hulks out, and he's this monstrous, huge thing. But I did feel like that needed a little bit of explanation. But I loved it how he ends up as Hulk eating Wolverine, and then, like, his grandkid's like, he has a healing factor. Like, oh no.
It's like, oh yeah, you forgot about that. And busts through him and basically said, you know what? I've wiped out the whole family. I'm going to take his baby and raise him as my own.
Yep. Didn't kill the baby, at least, which they certainly want you to think he's about to.
But yeah, very touching scene. He buries his wife and children, says goodbye, and says, I'm going to bring some law and order to this world. So, and that's where we leave him. And there's a great, after Secret Wars, they do pick up, and Old Man Logan does have a series at that point, because at the time, the original 616 Logan is gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So check that out in the upcoming omnibus, The Death of Wolverine. So
yeah, I had forgotten that this Logan actually showed up in 616 for a while.
Yep. Why not? Because you can't have a 616 without a Logan, even though we have Laura Kinney, which was a very suitable, very suitable within her own right, and always will be. So.
Absolutely.
All right. So again, I love Old Man Logan. I think it's a
so
great series, writing, art. It's definitely top 10 Wolverine stories for me.
Easy, fantastic story.
All right, so next week, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe #1. Again, as always, it is on Marvel Unlimited. Check it out on Comixology or whatever we're calling the Amazon equivalent these days. So, all right, Brent, great episode. As always, let's bring 211 to a close. Tell people how they can follow you.
Yeah, Brentech Prime, Threads, Twitter, all the places.
All the things, all the socials. And as always, want to thank our sponsor, organicpricebooks.com. Use that code MarvelGUA at checkout to get $2 off every single order. You can follow this show on Twitter at Marvel A Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter and all the socials at Chris Balga. You can follow my other show, World's Finest True Believers, at Finest Believers. You can email the show at marvellinespodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network on Twitter at GUAPodNetwork. Feel free to tweet, email if you want to provide ask questions, fact or fictions, anything. All DMs are open across our socials. Continue to rate and review the Marvel Alliance solo feed, GUA network feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us live in the chat. Thank you all for listening. Stay safe out there, everyone. And as Stan the Man would say, Excelsior, true believers. All right, Brent. Post-credits discussion tonight. I'm going to let you lead on this because I know I was excited about this with the creative team, but and I had gotten a chance to kind of read this before you did. But then this dropped, not just one, but 2 issues. And what are we going to spend our time for post-credits tonight talking about?
Ultimate Spider-Man, not the original Bendis and Bagley one, the new one with Hickman and how do I say their name? Chiquetto?
Yes, Chiquetto.
Chiquetto, thank you.
Chiquetto.
I will say this, Marco Chiquetto, just beautiful artwork the whole way through. No, I when this came out again, I've only read 2 issues. Don't tell me anything about issue 3 and beyond. I saw literally nothing but rave reviews. Like the worst review I saw was it's really good. Like nothing but hype. Like it was, and so it's you see something like that, you don't get to read it for a few months. You're like, is this really going to live up to it? I tell you, this lived up to it. I was thoroughly impressed.
And like I said, this says a lot about Hickman because talking with him at HeroesCon a couple of years ago, direct quote, Marvel pays me too much money to do a monthly series. He was strictly but this is not Hickman's first time dabbling in the Ultimate Universe. He had a time when he was dabbling a lot in what would basically mean like Ultimates 5 or 6 if one was counting at that point. But he had a story to tell, and this is based off of the events after Ultimate Invasion. It was a 4-issue series written by him. Do you have to read it? Not really. They do a good job of kind of like either in the first issue kind of a synopsis of what happened before, and there's a one shot that happens before this that kind of brings some other things together. Would it be helpful if you read that 4-issue mini plus the one shot? Yes, but not required to appreciate the story at all.
Right. It's this. Like I read the synopsis and I'm like, yep, that fits my memory of the event. And to be fair, knowing this was coming, like I had read Ultimate Invasion already. Like I love the original Ultimate line of books. Like Ultimate Spider-Man, Bendis Bagley is my favorite Spider-Man run. I really enjoyed the X-Men. The first couple volumes of the Ultimates I thought was great. The first 6 issues of Ultimate Fantastic Four I thought was okay before it went off the rails. Though it gave us the Maker, who is involved with this, and I do like that character. But I was excited, and obviously gave us Miles Morales. I was excited the Ultimate Universe was coming back, and I love the way they did it. Where it's not just, we're making a new universe, and that's our Ultimate line. Like it is people involved from that storyline, like the Maker, were involved in this. And I love the way they're doing that. But this Spider-Man, this Peter Parker, he's a full-grown adult. He's married to MJ. He's got 2 kids. Uncle Ben is alive. Uncle Ben works at the newspaper. J. Jonah Jameson, sorry, is nice. Right. It's very different. And at the same time, though, it's got the spirit. You can tell the character is there.
Especially like I said, just to play, and I'm just going to read directly from that thing, from the opening, say 20 years ago, the Maker, this is the big hook. This is what Ultimate Invasion is about. He goes back to the Ultimate Universe at the beginning and stops the heroes from being, a number of heroes from coming forward. One of them being Spider-Man. He prevented the radioactive spider from biting young Peter Parker on a number of heroes because he wanted to reshape the Ultimate Universe in the way he wanted it. And so, flash forward, Tony Stark learned of the dark history of the universe, sought to undo it, prompting the Maker's little group called the Council to attack Manhattan, killing thousands and framing Stark for it. Peter's lived his entire life unaware of what the Maker's Council had done and the Maker and the truth about what happened. And that is all about the change. And that is the hook for this. As Brent said, these are all characters that had existed in the original Ultimate Universe. And what an intriguing idea to see a grown up Peter Parker, we can say he's successful, happily married to Mary Jane with 2 kids. And even we get like some quick appearances of other like mainstays. We see Father Matt Murdock.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which interesting. He still appeared to be blind.
Yep.
So maybe he's somebody who still has his powers, or he became blind another way. But this Peter Parker, in the main typical Spider-Man stories we see, becoming Spider-Man happens to Peter. He doesn't choose to get the powers; it happens to him. And then, as you know, the events of what happened with Uncle Ben, he then is set on the path of being a superhero. Mm-hmm. In this, he feels something is wrong.
Something's been missing,
and I don't even necessarily want to detail how it happens, because if you haven't read it, I would highly encourage it.
Oh yeah, we're not gonna we'll spoil some things, but we're not gonna spoil.
He's basically told to. He's put in a position where he can choose to obtain the powers and become Spider-Man, where you have this happy life. You didn't, fail to stop a crook who killed your uncle. You didn't. You have your wife. You have your kids. You have a secure job. Granted, you may not like who ends up owning that newspaper after Jameson's leaves, but you have a secure job at least, and you can choose to become Spider-Man, or he doesn't know the name Spider-Man at this point, but you can choose to become a superhero. And the way that goes about, it was such an amazing sequence. And I was like, I was almost mad at the time I read it, because I could not immediately read the second issue.
And I want to read a couple of things, because there's a conversation. It doesn't reveal too much, but it's towards the end of the first issue of Peter and MJ having a conversation, kind of hinting at like he's as he says, I think I need a change. And MJ kind of says something, and she doesn't, like, she misses what he's trying to say. He says, no, MJ, I mean, I need to change. And she says, oh, that. He's like, what do you mean? And MJ goes, I know you, Peter Parker. You're an amazing husband and just a lights out as father. But you've been walking around for years with a cloud over you. You put on a good face, but you're not satisfied with who you are. Do you know what you have to do? He says, I think I do. Yes. Are things going to change between us? He says, never. Well then, she kisses him on the forehead, said, that settles it. I'm going to bed, and you go get him, Tiger. Like, that's all she needs. Like, you do you, boo. I've got your back. You don't need to tell me anything else. And then we get the revelation of what something is. He's given a message of what his choice is. And it's basically, as Morpheus told Neo, take the red pill or the blue pill.
He's put into that position. That's a great way to describe it. And at this point, I wasn't expecting 2 issues to drop. Very pleasant surprise. I don't know when the 3rd issue is. I used to try and track it, like, this came out here, so in about 3 months it should be. I don't. I look every Monday, see what hit, and read what I'm going to read. And this was such a great surprise. I've been waiting on it, and I tell you, as far as like new storylines go, I don't remember the last time I read a new Spider-Man book or issues that I thought were this good. The Chip Zdarsky Spider-Man I would put in this caliber that we've talked about before, but that wasn't new by the time I had read it. This wasn't new.
Yeah. Life Story is still, I think, I haven't read like Chip Zdarsky kind of mainline Spider-Man run, but Life Story I have read, and it is by far, it is in my top 10 Spider-Man stories of all time. Like, that had me in tears at the end. But like, you get to the second issue, and he's swinging around, he's figuring it out. But remember, this is an adult Peter that's never done this before, and just trying to figure this out. Meeting his first villain as well, and understanding like what he has to do in order to be this, but also meeting someone that could be a villain or could be an ally. Watching him from afar.
Go read it. just go read it. If just go buy a copy of it or get it on Marvel Unlimited or whatever, but could not recommend it more.
Yep. So the titles that make up the current Ultimate line is Ultimate Spider-Man. You have Ultimate Black Panther, which this week came out with, I think, their third issue. Ultimate X-Men. Now, I will say, Ultimate X-Men it has been the most divisive. And the reason for that are a couple of things. One, I'm a big fan of Peach Momoko, and it's very manga. So if you are big into manga, the art style is very much, but that's what Peach is known for. But this isn't a team book yet. This is focused on armor. And right now, again, keeping in mind of what the maker set up in this world, these are the ramifications for it. Black Panther's a lot of fun. It is written by, it's with Brian Hill and Stefano Caselli. The art is, again, outstanding. Writing is great. Same thing with Ultimate X-Men. But again, just caution you, if you're thinking you're going to X-Men team book, not yet. Crawl before you walk. That one's going to be probably the slow burn people are going to may want to wait on at that point. But this summer we're getting Ultimate Avengers back. So the team is being reformed.
And I will. I'll definitely check both of those out, X-Men and Black Panther, and then the future stuff with the line. But Spider-Man, at least, I'm with it for however long the title lasts.
Yep, I think it's good. I don't know how long Hickman's going to be on it, but I think he'll definitely be on there for the first two arcs. You better believe if
you read it in Ultimate and in Marvel Unlimited, I mean, there is an infinite version or whatever with the scrolling, but they have the regular version as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
That's only for issue 1, but if you like that kind of format, they do offer that as well. Or if you don't like that format, make sure you grab the one you want to be reading.
Very interesting. I don't think he's on the guest list yet. They've on Heroes Con, they have about 100 more guests to announce before the June date of them, but he has been a pretty frequent guest of Heroes Con, but so you better believe if he's there, I'm going to be poking him for some questions at that point. But he's been a very open, and he loves coming to this. He loves fan. He lives not too far from Charlotte, so it's an easy drive for him. He's very much the most nonchalant creator you'll ever meet. He'll just show up. He just has a table, no fanfare. He'll just sit at the table and says, "All right, give me your books." Doesn't charge a thing. He's one of the few creators that doesn't charge a thing for anything. So, real nice guy. But all right. Check out Ultimate Spider-Man. It's great. Brendan and I highly recommend it. We may be revisiting this as they drop issues. It's a fun post-credits we can always do every time.
Sure.
So. All right. See you all next week for X-Men 97, Episode 7. Bye-bye.